The topic is an introduction to Sri Aurobindo and the integral yoga. In fact, tomorrow is the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo and 75th National Independence Day, 15th August. Sri Aurobindo is not very much there in the history books, so one knows very little about Sri Aurobindo's contribution to the national independence movement. He was in active freedom struggle for about 5 years, and today we will learn more about how that contributed to the Indian independence. Suffice it to say that the Purno Swaraj, or the complete, totally independent India, that was Sri Aurobindo. He first talked about it, and even non-cooperation movement, that was his idea in his writings. So there are many other things which we will gradually know, possibly know today. And then while in jail, in Alipur jail, after about 4 or 5 years of active freedom struggle, he became aware of the supreme power of spirituality through a number of mystic experiences, had some vision of Sri Krishna, and then from there moved to Pondicherry, and 40 years spent there. So he attained Siddhi in integral yoga, and people know even much less about that. What is integral yoga? And the primary reason is that he visualized that India will become free in the next 50 years. And there will be movements, there will be world forces, there will be leaders. But then he also visualized that, the humanity is going through a crisis, and to harmonize all things, science, philosophies, and the human unity, in fact, and to attain perfection. So he immersed into yoga, and now anything under the earth, in the universe, you have questions that is answered very crystal clear in some writings. But unfortunately, we know very little about it. You ask anything, life, afterlife, anything under the cosmos, you have in his writings. He has written about 30,000 pages, in all topics. You think of it, and he has writings in that. So basically, we will know something from Mr. Neelesh Marik. He was a corporate professional for many years in blue chip corporate companies, in management consulting, in IT, and worked in various countries, cross cultures, and for the last decade his passion is psychology, social sciences, philosophy, complexities in life, spirituality, and he is immersed in integral yoga itself. Is immersed for the last few years, so we can learn from him what is it really, integral yoga, and how important is it, how necessary is it, and how we can achieve our life's goals and integrate all our actions and thoughts in integral yoga and live a fulfilling life. So over to Neelesh.
So before we start, I think it's with all humility we must state that we are entering the Pacific Ocean, and we are trying to capture the Pacific Ocean with a few streams, with the equivalent of a 1.5 hour talk or discussion on Sri Aurobindo is like trying to measure a large ocean using a spoon or a cup. So it is a difficult or a ambitious task. However, for people who may not be fully familiar with it, what we have tried to do is capture the very bare essentials that can germinate interest for you to explore further if you so wish, and enter that ocean yourself. This is an ocean where the water has to be drunk yourself. It's not good enough if somebody else drinks the water, and so therefore the only thing we can try to do is to create a kind of a thirst, so that each of us can enter this ocean and make use of the vastness and the sweetness and the force and the power of that ocean. So with that, we will try and cover this flow today. So we will very briefly, as Abhijit mentioned, go through his outer life. And that's what we can do. Outer life is the life that can be covered in a history book, or can be written in a history book. So we'll have a quick look at that. Then we'll dive straight into the crux of what his core teaching is, which itself is an ocean, but I've tried to capture it first as the crux and then define 4 principles on which his entire system of thought is based. There are many, but I have chosen 4 foundational principles. For anyone wishing to pursue the reading of Sri Aurobindo, I have found that understanding these 4 foundational principles makes the reading easier, or simpler, or more navigable. We then come to the 4th point about how is this related to us? Why should we even bother reading this or getting into this ocean? Are we not good enough without it, as we normally are? So then that's an area we need to cover. Otherwise, why are we even spending time this evening, right, with each other? We then examine why this is called the integral yoga, which in Hindi or Bengali can be termed as samagrik or shamagrik. It basically encapsulates everything. Integrality, the examination of integrality is, as I was just now said, there is nothing or no question or no issue of the human existence that is unanswered or left undealt with. So he has basically covered the entire cosmos, not just in his teaching but in his own experience. And so we will have a glimpse of why, the nature of the integrality. And finally, for those of us who are not only interested in intellectual knowledge but would like to have an experience of this in our own lives, a modest way we will cover on how we can starting tonight after we finish this session. So that's the flow. So he was born in 15th August 1872. Tomorrow is his 150th birth anniversary. And by the age of 7, his father, Krishnadhan Ghosh, sent him to England because his father believed that the wealth of knowledge lies in the West, not in the East. So from a very young age 7 is just about when you can begin to start thinking. Before that you're like very young. He was in England, so he was cut off from his roots and went straight to England and studied everything that the Western world had to offer for 14 years. And in those 14 years he basically was in London, first stayed in Manchester, then studied in St. Paul's, London, and then went to King's College, Cambridge, which is a very famous, very well-known academic institution where he excelled in everything, studied the Western classics, studied all the Western languages, the main Western languages, English, French, German, Italian, read all the classics in their original language, not translated, but in their original language. You know, it makes a difference, right? Studying somebody in the original language is different from a translation. Rabindranath translated in English is very good, but can never convey what Rabindranath is in. So similarly, having had the whole panorama of the Western intellectual world in terms of classics and philosophy and mythology, he returned to India in 1893 to Baroda, where he took up some administrative positions with the Maharaja of Baroda called the Gaikwad, and then also got into the Baroda College. From 1893 to 1906 he was in Baroda, and that was the time when he actually got into the knowledge of India. He learned Sanskrit, he learned Indian languages, Gujarati, Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, and only after age 21, the point to note is that he got into his core area of life, his core area of work after age 21. And by the time he was in Baroda, he had started writing a lot in newspapers and magazines, and in those days not online but all physical. And by that time he had caught on to the state of India in terms of its political subjugation under England, which bothered him a lot, because by that time he had started identifying with the national consciousness of India. But that process took a great leap in 1905 with the partition of Bengal, which was an engineered event by the British government to divide the country on communal lines, which we are still suffering from today. And that partition of Bengal occasioned Sri Aurobindo to actually come to Bengal as the head of the Bengal National College and take charge of the national education movement. And from 1905 to 1906, actually to 1910, he was in the thick of revolutionary activity in Bengal. And as Abhijit just mentioned, he actually took charge of the entire revolutionary national freedom struggle movement, which had languished into a form of cowardly submission and mollification of the British overlords by the moderate wing of the Indian National Congress. And they were called moderate because they were not bold enough to demand what was their birthright, so they were in the appeasement mode. He realized that the appeasement mode is not going to get anywhere, so he actually started the new lifeline blood of revolutionary politics, which included both passive resistance as well as militant action if required. So that Bengal block of 4 years represents the pinnacle and peak of Sri Aurobindo's revolutionary activity for the political landscape of the country and setting the direction for the country, which leaders later on emulated in their own way, accurately or inaccurately, which eventually led to the India's independence in 1947. So in a sense, he was the architect in a political sense, but later on he became the spiritual architect, which means that, and which brings us to actually his next stage of his life, which is prison life. It was just 1 year in Alipur jail, not very far from here. And because of a bomb case in Muzaffarpur, they apprehended him as a result of the involvement of his brother Bhavin in that bomb incident, and he was implicated as the mastermind of that particular bomb blast, and also the general mastermind. British people used to call him the most dangerous man in India, and they put him in prison. But that adverse turn of events, as is always usually the case with the divine intervention, actually made him turn from the political to the spiritual. And although he had had some experiences before of the silent self and the Nirvana experience in 1907, 1908 in the prison life, he had much more profound experiences, including the force and the yoga of the Gita and a direct communion with Sri Krishna. A direct communion and relationship and interchange at the consciousness level with Sri Krishna. So much so that his life pivoted at that time. After coming out of prison, he was acquitted because the charge against him did not add up. And Deshabandhu Chittaranjan Das was a very famous lawyer, actually was involved in the case, in liberating him, arguing his case. And then he got into much more philosophical writing than political writing through the journal called Karma Yogin, where his writing took a turn of a much more integral nature. So it's not just politics, but the larger meaning of life, the meaning of spiritual power and the origin of life, and basically more into metaphysics, epistemology, and those kind of things. And Karma Yogin actually represents his first foray before Pondicherry of his spiritual life in verbal written form. So between prison life and Pondi, that was when he was in Calcutta for a brief time, and then he got an Adesh. He received a direct communication that which he actually had done even in the prison life, because in the prison life when he was imprisoned, he asked that why am I here? I was supposed to do the work for the country. And he received an answer saying that, well, the work I have for you is not the normal politics. I have a bigger work for you. It is not just political freedom for India, but it is the freedom for humanity. Not just in India, but the world, and actually the universe. And your work has a far greater significance over a far greater period of time than any political struggle for a few years. And so that is what I want you to do, and that is why I have brought you here. So this is interchange directly with the Supreme. And so more explicitly, in 1910 he received instructions to first go to Chandanagar and then to Pondicherry. How are we doing on time? If we extend a bit, is that okay?
It's okay.
It's okay, absolutely.
Yes. It's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
So then, is Pondicherry, as Abhijit mentioned, 40 years. And then another very important phenomenon is that he was joined by the mother. Just that subject itself is a few hours, but I will say the mother is the second aspect of the avataric incarnation required for the new creation in terrestrial human existence. Earlier, all avatars had come alone. Right? We have heard of the various avatars, the Dasha avatars, including some in the animal form, the Matsya avatar, the Varaha avatar, then the Vamana avatar, then Ram, then Parashuram, right? Krishna. They had all more or less come alone. They had some female or women company, feminine company, but they were more in the background. Strong, but relatively in the background. Radha, Sita. But this, because it's a new creation, you require both the male and the female principle. Not in a biological sense, but in a spiritual sense. And that was the mother, who was actually of French nationality, but of Turkish Egyptian origin, who had her own life till then, and in 1914 came and met Sri Aurobindo. And both of them recognized each other as direct representatives from above to do this new work. And what is this new work is the subject of today's talk. The next milestone is what is called the Siddhi Day, November 24, 1926, when Sri Krishna completely merged with Sri Aurobindo even at the physical level. Now some of these sentences might seem a bit odd. What does one mean by merging at the physical level? Through a normal materialist lens, these words might seem, what am I talking about, right? But in the spiritual sense, once we get to understand, it is Sri Krishna as the
We
pinnacle.
meet mother which year?
1914. So from 1914 to 1926, he was working. He actually wrote the Arya, his first set of writings. The mother went for 6 years to Japan, and in 1920 came back. There are a lot of detail, but I'm just trying to basically just move on. Siddhi Day was a very important day where, in a sense, it can symbolically be said that that was the day when Sri Krishna, as the previous incarnation of the Supreme, handed over the responsibility or the baton to Sri Aurobindo. in terms of the spiritual government of the world. Not political government, not Prime Minister, President, but spiritual government of the world. After Siddhi Day the ashram actually got into shape, the ashram was set up, which is currently called the Pondicherry Ashram. And very soon Aurobindo was mutated as a model for the next human civilization in terms of its structure and function. It was a microcosm. It is still imperfect in many ways, but the mother and Aurobindo imparted their energy as the future model on which the rest of the world will be organized. And this Aurobindo is the seed. And the final stage is Sri Aurobindo's exiting his body on 5th December 1950. So this is the outer life, but as he himself says, neither you nor anyone else knows anything at all about my life. It has not been on the surface for them to see. So what we have just discussed is, that's why I have called it the outer life in terms of outer facts. But his real work is his inner life, which we will try to get a glimpse of in the subsequent slides. Now, what is the teaching of Sri Aurobindo? In very simple terms, we can say that his teaching represents the realization of the objective of the Tantra through the method of the Vedanta. What does that mean? Vedanta is the upasana or the realization of the self or the Brahman in silence, in contemplation, in meditation. A direct ascent. Tantra, on the other hand, deals with the mastery and enjoyment of the powers of nature, which is not necessarily in silence. So Vedanta is concerned with silence, Tantra is concerned with movement. Vedanta is stillness, Tantra, I am saying in a very basic sense. So the core of his teaching is that there is one conscious being who is all there is in the whole universe. But when he manifests himself in various forms across a graded hierarchy of planes. So it's not a homogeneous creation, but a heterogeneous creation in which the one conscious reality or the one conscious being as if multiplies himself in all of us, for example, and that sofa and this table and that air conditioner. Everything is him, but he does it in different forms, different shapes, different colors, because that is the part of his Leela. But in each of these different objects, his consciousness is distributed in a different way. So the configuration of his consciousness in me is not in the same as you and not same as hers. That's the multiplicity or the diversity coming from that unity. That's the first teaching. The second teaching is that while this happens, in the process, each of the individuated units tend to forget where they come from. They suffer some kind of an amnesia, bhule jawa in Bengali. It is as if there's an amnesia or a forgetfulness of where we have come from, and a loss of sensitivity of the conscious origin. So, the crux of the teaching, when we say involution and evolution, what this means is, involution is the process by which the supreme reality, as if, conceals himself into amnesia or self-forgetfulness as perceived by his different formal representations, which are us. And then below us there are animals and plants, and then finally inanimate objects. So all these objects don't know who they are, right? So that is the forgetfulness of the amnesia. And the objective of evolution, so that is involution. Evolution is the process by which each of these objects begin to become conscious of their origin and unite with the source. So it is coming down into forgetfulness and rising up into consciousness and memory and recapturing of the original source from which we have emerged. Right? That is the crux of the teaching. But throughout, so Vedanta also recognizes this, But throughout the spiritual history of mankind, people have not found a way of doing this. A proper, reliable, comprehensive, foolproof way of doing this simple thing. Sounds very simple. Forgetfulness, come back to memory. But in this complexity of creation, how does one do it? So a lot of spiritual experiments have happened throughout human history, but Aurobindo was the one who brought it and took it to its entire consummation. And that's why it's called the integral yoga. Now, we said there are these various formal representations of his, but the human being among this is very special because we in the graded hierarchy of different organisms or beings have the highest potential. We have the highest potential because we have a faculty, a self-reflective capacity in our mind where we are capable of self-observation and self-adjustment, which an animal cannot do. An animal does not have the capacity to observe itself and correct itself. It operates on impulse, right? Food, sleep, procreation, etc. Running around. A plant even less. Among the series of animals, there are grades of intelligence. For example, an elephant or a dolphin is more intelligent than a lower grade animal, but it's only in the human being that this capacity of self-reflection and conscious self-dwelling is possible, and therefore Sri Aurobindo's teaching is that the human is going to be the bridge between that forgetfulness part of the creation and the self-consciousness of the Supreme. And this bridging the huge gap between the spiritual origin of creation and the material final formation in which the whole world finds itself, which is now divorced, can be bridged by this conscious progression of the human being. And that conscious progression path is called the yoga. What is yoga? Yoga means jog. It means joining. In very simple terms, it means joining. The human participation in joining creates the bridge for the conscious evolution of this created manifestation back to the source for its ultimate, complete and total fulfillment. So far so good? So we said a graded hierarchy of planes. These are the 7 planes. This itself is a several hours discussion, but suffice it to say for now that the upper 3, existence, consciousness, bliss, is the divine zone. The mental, vital, physical things below is the human zone and the animal zone. And that thing in the middle called supermind is the bridge between the two, between what is called the upper hemisphere. This is the upper hemisphere and this is the lower hemisphere. And this is the bridge or the intermediate principle between the upper hemisphere and the lower hemisphere. Very important. Prior to Sri Aurobindo, nobody had reached the supermind, or even if some Vedic rishis had glimpsed it, they did not take possession of it. They could not take charge of the supramental principle. In the history of humanity, only Sri Aurobindo and the mother have actually ascended to this plane and therefore are in a position to bridge the higher hemisphere with the lower hemisphere, in very simple terms. All the other spiritual leaders have gone very high in the mind or maybe in the domain between these two, but they have not seized it. And not only did Sri Aurobindo and the mother seize it, they actually brought the power down right till the bottom. That is the crux of the integral. So when the power of this divine consciousness comes down here, each of these 3 planes move from their lower operation to their higher operation. L is lower operation, H is higher operation. So the physical system, our body, our default position is inertia, inconscience, laziness, slothfulness, indolence, torpor, right? Like we feel after we get up from sleep. I mean, it's almost like it's an inert object. Right? The higher operation, when it's supramentalized, it becomes equanimous, it becomes stable, it becomes samatha, we get samatha. Similarly, the pranic layer, which is called the vital layer, is primarily ruled by primitive impulses and desires and urges, much like an animal. Primitive emotions, primitive desires, primitive impulses, basically closer to the animal. But when that is restored to its higher principle, we get tapas, divine vitalization and dynamization. Mind is normally an instrument of thought, but when raised to its higher principle, it can be universalized and immersed in unity consciousness. But that is easier said than done. It has to be done through the principle of the yoga. So, apart from the vertical system of 7 planes, there is the horizontal system of the inner and outer being. I am not going to go into this because this is a very involved matter of the integral metaphysics. But suffice it to say that normally we operate in this constellation of the outer nature called the ego. But lying within us in the vast domains of universal consciousness are the inner planes, and the inner planes are divided between Prakriti and Purusha, which we will just understand what that means. And deep inside is what we call the Antaratman or the soul. And the first stage in the integral yoga journey is to move from here to here. That itself can take several years. But this, the recovery of our individuality at the level of the soul, is the precondition for our commerce with the vertically higher centers of consciousness. We cannot do it from here. We don't even know. If you ask anybody staying in the, including ourselves, are we aware of these things? We'll say, no, we don't know what you're talking about. It's just a diagram. What is this? This is completely Greek. So there is the psychic transformation is the stage of the yoga where we move from here to this domain to here and reclaim our identity here, and only then can we open it up. Okay. So the foundational principle 1 is planes of consciousness and parts of being. Foundational principle 2 is the relationship between the Purusha and the Prakriti, which is also known as the soul and the nature. It's very, very important to understand. Purusha is consciousness, Prakriti is movement of consciousness.
That's right.
Purusha is the witness, the guy who is quiet, the part who is observing, silent. Prakriti is the energy which is moving out into creation. Both are necessary, right? So, one of the central tenets of the integral yoga is that in a normal human existence, which is 99.99% of the world and all of us, Prakriti dominates the Purusha. Prakriti, nature dominates the soul, which means the movement is as if in control of the silent self. In the integral yoga, the relationship has to be reversed. Exactly opposite. The soul or the Purusha or the witness or the silent self has to be in control of the energy or the movement. So take an example. When we get angry, can we control ourselves? Very often not. Because the movement of anger is in charge of the one who is observing inside. Sometimes we say, well, how did I get carried away like this? How could I become so angry? My God, I lost it. Not just anger, anything. Jealousy, fear, insecurity. Normal interactions with each other, right, in life. Especially when it's a challenging situation. In a normal, happy situation, everybody is very polite and, hello, how are you? But in a, like we went through COVID in the last 2-3 years, right? COVID put us into very difficult and challenging situations. How did we behave? How did we come across with others? How did we treat somebody who is a COVID patient? Did we run away from them or did we have the courage to look after them? I'm just giving some examples. Prakriti is in charge of Purusha. The movement, which is this whole caught up with the world movement, takes charge of the silent Purusha who regrets it, who says, how could I behave like that? I can't believe that it was me. That means the Purusha who is able to observe and witness is nonplussed and aghast that the world movement took charge of me and I couldn't do anything about it. The yogic process, or that process from ego to self, restores the suzerainty, the supremacy or the control of the nature to the soul. Khashi band hoye gache. That means you have taken charge of the khashi.
No, my mind is now full on that. তাই না মনটা যেখানে যাবে
So, Sri Aurobindo's philosophy can sound a bit very deep, but if we are able to relate it to real life, it is the most practical teaching possible. Because it deals with the highest principles of existence and brings it down to the level where we can not only relate to it, but actually begin to take action. But it requires a little bit of time. That's why I said 1 hour today is just a The third principle, slightly big sounding terms, but I'll try to make it simple. For the integral spiritual experience, we have to have the experience of all three aspects of spiritual reality, which is called God, man and nature, which is also called the transcendent, the individual and the universal. The individual we can relate to because we are that. Right? If the individual we can relate to because we are a concentrated portion of the transcendent of God and the instrument of the evolution, as we said, because that's the human role, because we are the most conscious among all animals and etc. etc. So that is the individual principle. We can relate to it because we perceive ourselves as an individual, as if separate from other individuals, the rest of creation. So that's a very important principle. The second principle is universal. So we just now said fear, anger, jealousy, insecurity, death. They are all universal principles. They have an individual footprint because they attack us all, or they sort of take charge of us all, but they exist at a universal level independent of the individual also. So there is a principle or a movement of jealousy all over the world. Similarly of fear, of all forms of emotion, all forms of thought. Democracy, capitalism, communism are two streams of mental energy which exist in the universal plane. So the universal is defined as, if the individual is a concentrated portion, the universal is a diffused aspect because it is all over. It is not individuated in any, but it exists as a general principle in the universe. Am I making myself clear? So therefore it is called the field and condition. We have to operate in the field and condition of fear and grief and worry and misery. And there are good things also, of light, of joy, of celebration, of happiness, of peace. So the universal has both the positive and the negative, both the challenging ones and the helpful ones. And that is the condition in which the Supreme has allowed himself to be devolved. The Supreme, which is called the Transcendent, which we call God with a capital G, allows himself to be devolved or decentralized into universal movements of nature which are called gods with a small g. Indra, Varuna, Mitra, the Vedic gods are all in the universal domain of the spiritual reality. The 5-6 of us sitting here are in the individual domain of spiritual reality. And the individual and universal are constantly in interchange with each other. In our early stages, when we are ruled by the ego, the universal rules us. That is why we are seized by anger and fear and not able to do much. Or we can, better than the animal, but not much. If the situation is challenging enough, we move towards the animal nature pretty quickly, unflatteringly. Right? But as the yogic journey begins, then the universal, the individual begins to influence and prevail upon the universal. So the mechanism of yoga is that there are enough number of individuals who move from that prakriti, from ego to the soul in the previous diagram. Then the new nexus of a spiritualized or a higher consciousness will begin to have an imprint on the universal field and change the universal field from its lower mode of operation to the higher mode of operation. Will that change? And who are both these deriving their power and their energy and their activity from? Who else? The transcendent. It's a very simplified way of communicating. This is a very simple. This is why I am calling this foundational principle 3, because many other spiritual paths either focus on this or only on this, but none of them have been able to crystallize a clear and precise interrelationship between these three dimensions of the spiritual reality. It's very, very, very important. If and when we start reading Aurobindo, this will become clear and alive to us in our. Today it's just a theoretical statement. The fourth foundational principle is what is called the psychic presence, which we defined in the previous slide, what we call the soul. And this is the central pillar or the starting pillar on which the integral yoga begins. Without this, the integral yoga does not begin. And the only other place where this has been covered partly are in the bhakti movements, but there it is not crystallized and defined as the psyche in as precise terms. So the Vaishnava movement, or even Sri Ramakrishna's bhakti towards Makali, and then in the Christian Gnostic tradition, the love for Jesus, they all have a psychic principle and they come from that place of devotion. But none of them have been able to philosophically define what the psychic presence is in these four terms. And many more. I have captured the main four. First and foremost is that this is the divine spark. It is covered up in us. We are not aware of it because the gross outer nature has almost smothered it. It's like you take a pea and you smother it with a large pillow. You remember that fairy tale Princess and the Pea? There's a pea under several pillows. You can't register it, right? Because the pillow is covering it. Or it's like a small piece of gold, small speck of gold, I throw it in the dust. I can't even find it because the most of around is all dust. But this is inside, deep inside. It is the divine spark. And this is what we have to recapture to begin the journey. This is our essence. This is our essence. Not the mental thought, the vital emotion and the physical body. This is just the clothing. What we take to be ourselves is the clothing. When I am wearing this shirt and I take off this shirt at night, do I think I am the shirt? Some people are identified with their clothes. They think they are their clothes. But we can understand that we don't identify because we take it out next morning, we wear something else. Isn't it? We don't take it very seriously. Only to the extent of wearing good clothes and showing off to others that I am wearing nice clothes. Only to that extent. Similarly, the yoga tells us that even this mind, life, body is actually just a clothing. The real truth is which is non-tangible in a materialist sense, and that is the source, that is the spark, and that is the soul. That is the divine essence in us. And as we mentioned earlier, that is the conduit to the higher phase of consciousness, not the outer ego. From the outer ego we will never be able to reach. Finally, it is also the vehicle of continuity across lives. But this itself is a very, very large discussion. Suffice it to say that in this yoga, rebirth is a must. So there are many schools of thought who say there is only one life. One of the Hindi movies, Zindagi na milegi dobara. Means what? That this is it. That's total falsehood. When we understand the integral yoga, we realize we have to come here again and again because it is the soul's entry into phenomenal existence for its own growth and spiritual evolution. And with every birth, there is something gained. So that the next life begins from that gained point, and so on. So each of us here, the fact that we are reading this today means in our previous lives, we have prepared in some way for us to have this experience today. And if after this meeting we continue studying this, it means we have finally caught on to what our eventual spiritual destiny was and is. So, why should we even bother about all this? All this is very good sounding, but it is really practical. I mean, can we do it? Can we do all this? Is it possible? Why would we bother studying the integral yoga of Aurobindo?
No, I feel each individual has its inner kind of evolution because life is a continuous process of evolution.
Yes.
So, as whichever is our capacity, accordingly we go rise or fall.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
Absolutely. And usually even the fall is a step towards a further rise.
Yes.
So, the reason we have to look at this in our own pace at our own time, which you rightly said, everybody need not proceed at the same pace at the same time, in the same manner. Each of us will have our own. But the very fact that we go inside and think that why am I here? And what is this life all about? Is it just about doing a job and buying groceries and whatever, watching TV in the evening and bringing up kids and the usual stuff that, and having some parties at birthday vista and is that all, or is there something more that we can do or we are here to do? And so therefore what he says is that, I read this quote, firstly we find ourselves in tremendous disharmony, not just with others, especially when times are difficult. Because COVID is an interesting experience. There was a lot of disharmony, right, all over the place. Tremendous suffering
within ourselves also.
and within ourselves also. Absolutely. Absolutely. So the disharmony problem is not just the problems with others, but within our different parts. We saw our different parts in the planes and parts, the outer and inner. Normally when we are living in the ego, we don't even know all these parts exist, but we feel there is an unease, there is some discomfort, something is not right. Something in me feels uneasy and says that life can't be, there has to be something more in life. Okay, I might ignore it for one night, for 1 year, another year. Okay, let me try to live. Yeah, no. But eventually the spiritual call will come and say, no, this is not good enough. You have to rise beyond this. So this quote, to the ordinary man who lives upon his own working surface, ignorant of the self's depths and vastnesses behind the veil, his psychological existence is fairly simple. A small but clamorous company of desires, some imperative intellectual and aesthetic cravings, some tastes, a few ruling or prominent ideas amid a great current of unconnected or inconnected, mostly trivial thoughts, a number of more or less imperative vital needs, alternations of physical health and disease, a scattered and inconsequent succession of joys and griefs, frequent minor disturbances and vicissitudes, and rarer strong searchings and upheavals of mind or body. And through it all, nature, partly with the aid of his thought and will, partly without or in spite of it, arranging these things in some rough, practical fashion, some tolerable, disorderly order. This is the material of his existence. Most of humanity, this is the life. But there are few who are saying, well, this is not good enough. I mean, I may have done this for many lives, I am doing this in this life also. But there is somebody pointing out to me, like Aurobindo, that if you want, it need not be like this. It need not be. If you are happy with this, fine, continue as you are. But if you are saying that, well, this is not good enough and I can do better, you are welcome to the path. But this is an individual call. Each person will have their own. So what are the normal, how do normal human beings derive their life aim and goal. If the scale of vision is only I, me, myself, which means the complete selfish narcissist, there are many around us, can't we see in Facebook or I, me, myself. Every day a new selfie or a new whatever, my holiday, my new car or my new this thing. So the I, me, myself scale of vision, the only aim can be hedonism, which means full pleasure pleasure seeking, or I, me, myself, this is too much of a troubled world, let me escape into the Himalayas or some forest or some
Escape.
hermitage. Yes. So what is the focus of action? Either maximize pleasure or minimize pain. One of the two. It can only be these two, right? Maximize pleasure or minimize pain. The hedonist tries to maximize pleasure. The escapist tries to minimize pain. और नहीं हो रहा है और अपने साथ जा रहा है. If my these are very, if my this scale of vision is beyond I, my but just my family, हम अच्छे में बेटा बेटी एक दो दोस्त और बस, then what will I do? I'll somehow or try to optimize between unhappy circumstances. For the kid, give up the job, or leave the kid with a baby and a nanny and take up a career, or I can't satisfy my husband or wife, I focus more on the job to derive benefits from there, or I have a contribution to Upohar society, let me be the governing member here and try to look after the infrastructure of Upohar, and that is my social service. There is some kind of optimization with various patchy and mostly unhappy circumstances. So what is my focus? I balance personal needs with this obligation, that obligation, with this person, that person, and constantly I am struggling between that optimization. Something fails, something else gives. That's the life, right? We can all recognize this. Some go beyond my family and friends, it's the society and world. Then they can either idealism or usualism. So this is where I want to become a philosopher or a teacher or a political neta. Actually, political neta is actually concerned only with I, me, myself. In his outer level, he says, I want society in the world. But what is this? But fundamentally, he is only here. That is all a show to for the others, so that the others vote for him. And stupid people do that. And then I go here and I have what 27 crores discovered in this flat or that flat, or with this female friend or male friend or whatever it is. That is idealism. But there are some good people also who are, for example, there are a few good people who genuinely want to do good for the world. They rise in either in academia or in for example, Ramakrishna Mission you have studied, there are some people who have tried to do good, they set up schools, hospitals. So it is at least among, compared to these three, at least they are striving for excellence in something. But integral yoga is this. There is no me here, it is you and your work. Who is you? Who is the you here? Not son, not wife, not boss, not Upohar. This you is the one conscious being. So this is when in the fourth there is a complete flip. There is a complete, these are all more or less the same except that I have moved from a slightly larger circle of selfish interest. Slightly larger circle of selfish interest. Here there is no selfish, there is the small self goes. There is only the capital self. S, capital S. So if I am able to make the move of you and your work, then then I enter the domain of yoga. And what is my focus of action? I have access to knowledge, power and fulfillment which these can never ever give me. They won't even come close. And I'm sure everybody here has tried some of these things in our own way, in some way or the other. Right? We have to answer. I mean, personally, I spend a lot of time in this business and this, that. Eventually slowly I realized this is. So this is a fluke. This is, I mean, this fourth thing, where I am able to say there is nothing of me left, but only you, and the entire shift of my existence is you and your work. Then I begin yoga. So he says, if mankind could but see through in a glimpse of fleeting experience that fourth thing, what infinite enjoyments, what perfect forces, what luminous reaches of spontaneous knowledge, what wide calms of our being are waiting for us in the tracks which our animal evolution has not yet conquered, they would leave all and never rest till they have gained these treasures. So that fourth line has all the treasures. The treasures before that are all the treasures of one good meal, or one good house, or one good car, or one good job, or one good holiday, or one good what is it, jewels maybe, ornaments.
Material
Yes.
comforts. Yes.
Or egotistical comforts. I am minister, I am whatever, CEO, or. But the way is narrow. The doors are hard to force, and fear, distrust, and skepticism are there, sentinels of nature, to forbid the turning away of our feet from her ordinary pastures. So the upper three are called ordinary pastures. But we are so enamored by the ordinary pastures, despite our checkered experience with it, we still want to go back to the ordinary pasture because the sentinels of nature are very strong. And this fear, distrust and skepticism, why should I bother about all this higher existence? Forget it. Let me stay as I am. So, what do we have to do? What can we do? We are going to come to that towards the end. From these ordinary pastures, there are 3 steps. Find the soul. 3 as in simply said, it's not easy, but first is find the soul and allow it as the center of existence. Second, once you find the soul, ascent to the higher planes as we showed in that diagram becomes easy, and allow the descent of the spiritual force to transform the nature. And third, become worthy of divine suffusion. Divine suffusion means when these 2 things are done, the spirit directly comes and takes charge and lifts us to its own way of power, knowledge, bliss, love, of an unparalleled intensity and nature. This is in our hands, and this to a certain extent is in our hands. But when we have done this sincerely and willingly and committedly as the single purpose in life, this begins on its own, and finally this comes and takes charge of us for a total spiritual existence. That's why I call it a categorically higher order of existence. Category means it's a different leap. It's not an incremental change. आज 1 चम्मच घी खाया, कल 2 चम्मच घी. No. This is a category. It's from ghee to nectar, amrit. It's a qualitative shift. So a quick glance at the spiritual history of mankind for the last actually hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of years. Before Sri Aurobindo and the mother came, it was all experimentation. A lot of good things have happened, by the way. But they have all had partial focus. Shamogrik chilona. And it had partial focus and did some very good things and very nice things. And they made their own breakthrough and they caught on to some of the principles, but did not have the entirety of the whole picture. So popular yoga, we know, they are concerned only with the body and all of that, which is very It's a fashion today all over the world, right? The Western world, their understanding of yoga is just the yoga man doing Sisasana or Bhujangasana or Makarasana or whatever. There's nothing wrong in it, it's good for looking after the body, but that's not the real meaning of yoga. Yoga is union with the divine. Western commercialism has converted yoga to
Into
Bikram
physical
yoga,
level.
hot yoga, cold yoga, sweat yoga,
Physical level.
physical level. Why? Because our identification is largely with our body, no? Like body and vitality. How will my body look? Will it look good enough? Outer look, no inner look. Yeah, exactly. Then there are mindfulness schools, there are a lot of, this is only for stress reduction. MBSR, John Kabat-Zinn, huge movements all over. Even in India, art of living and a lot of good work, but I mean, they're missing the larger picture of what yoga means. Very popular. Right? Art of living is extremely popular. Sadhguru, then a lot of, and some of them are good guys and they are doing, but compared to this, it's like, it's. Then there's Raja Yoga, Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda of this place, master of Raja Yoga, huge. Raja Yoga takes it to the higher levels of the mind. Samyama, control, equanimity. We are now rising in the level of the yogic hierarchy. Then, by the side, this is largely mind and above mind. This is heart. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, ISKCON and Vaishnava, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all of that. So this is Bhakti Sangeet, Nach Gan, Kirtan. There's a lot of sweetness in it. Pandit Jasraj, Kumar Gandharv, a lot of music and devotional. But it is largely in vital chemistry domain. The real spiritual depth, because of this excitement, sometimes gets missed out and misplaced, and we lose track. Because it's again one-sided. Then there is this ascetic, high on top of the mountain, sadhana for 30 years, away from the world. Again another dimension. The Buddha did this. And great realizer. Buddha is no question that he was an awesome realizer. But his path was a path of disengagement from the world. The question arises, why did the divine create the world if the topmost yogi disengages from it? Then what will happen to the world? If the topmost yogi chooses to disengage and steps back and leaves the world to the wolves,
That's right.
wolves and the hyenas,
It's a type of escapism.
but no disrespect, see what we are trying, then again popular tantric path, enjoyment of nature went heavily towards sexual indulgence and a whole host of other problematic issues. Especially the Bhama Marga of the Tantra, the Osho Rajneesh and various others, they had some good points but quickly degenerated into the lowest common denominator of pollution. So the point of this slide is that, and there are many, I have just listed 6 here, but if you take combinations and all that, you can list another several bullets, both in the East and the West. The point being made here is that none of them were integral. Integral yoga brings the 3 faculty imperatives into one single movement. What are the 3 faculty imperatives in us? The imperative to know, which we call jnana. The imperative to love, which we call bhakti. And the imperative to do, to work, to exercise will, which we call karma. In each of these 3, there is a specific rasa, rosh, rasa, a certain flavor of experience. Jnana has the flavor of knowledge. The Brahmins, the teaching, the knowledge. There are some of us who are moved by knowledge. I want to know more. There are some of us who are moved by the desire to love. I want to love, I want to give, I want to interact, I want to have relationships. I want to meet people and have greater social amity and exchange. So that is the bhakti. And karma is I want to work, I want to run a business, I want to set up a venture, I want to do entrepreneurship, or I want to do social work, or whatever. Okay? But each of these remain unfulfilled until they are all turned towards you and your work. That's his realization. Because here jnana means what? Normal knowledge. We study more and more this subject, that subject. Ultimately, rasa nahi hai. Loving what? Okay, romantic love, this love, filial love, parental love. It's nice, it has its own place. But there is nothing that equals the Radha Krishna.
But bhakti, as you said, is also the unconditional surrender. There is no selfishness. But this say bhakti, okay, আমরা সন্ধ্যাবেলা প্রদীপ জ্বালাই, নমস্কার, ওটা একটা রুটিন মতো। কিন্তু যদি কোনো কিছু করছি কারোর জন্য, আনকন্ডিশনাল সারেন্ডার, তখনই একটা স্পিরিচুয়াল
সেম। আমি কাজ কার জন্য করছি, এই তিনটেই when they turn towards an unconditional giving to the source is when the real rasa comes, and that rasa is infinite.
আর সেই আনন্দটা এত বেশি হয়,
infinite. In any normal love, including the human loves, very soon we reach either problems or insufficiency ki to our right. So it is that, but the divine allows it because it gives us the first taste. Unless we love a human being, we won't get the taste of what love really means. What does it mean to completely give yourself to the other? We taste oita korano por. Finally, when we turn to the divine, the real rasa comes. That is why he says the integral. How do these things? He says if you take any of these paths, the other two are bound to follow. In the sense that
একটু আগে আপনি বললেন না, that bhakti devotional songs, at least যখন কারো মনকে when it touches the soul, at least for that second we go a little higher. ওইটুকুনের জন্য একটা ভালো সাহিত্য পড়লাম, তখন
রবীন্দ্রনাথ is,
and when it touches your soul, একটা চোখ থেকে জল সেটা আনন্দের মানে এত স্পর্শ করে যে ওরকম হয়।
Indeed. But the point is, যারা খালি ওই ভক্তিতে যাবে তারা যদি জ্ঞান আর কর্মে না হয় তাহলে তাদের লাইফ স্টিল রিমেইনস ইনকমপ্লিট।
না, কিন্তু গীতার মধ্যে লেখা আছে যখন এই আনকন্ডিশনাল সারেন্ডারে ভক্তি করে আপনা থেকে জ্ঞান
এইটাই absolutely. So if you pursue any of these completely towards the end, the other two are bound to follow. Why? Especially when the object of the love and bhakti and jnana is the divine. Because if you love somebody, it's like this. If I really love somebody, we have experienced in our human love, you would want to do everything for that person. So that is karma. That is karma. And you also get to know that it's as if you can feel what the other person is feeling. You're identified because you love like your child. Your child is suffering. You can almost feel the pain yourself because the child is you. So that is knowledge of my identity. That is jnana. So in a spiritual sense, all three get unified. The grand unification happens in the integrality of the synthesis, and the object of each of three imperatives is not other human beings or social institutions, but the divine himself. কিছু বলছিলেন আপনি?
হ্যাঁ, আমি বলছিলাম এই যে জ্ঞান আর কর্ম আছে না, ওই আমাদের কর্মযোগেতে কৃষ্ণকে অর্জুন জিজ্ঞেস করছে, অর্জুন তো স্টুডেন্ট হিসেবে কৃষ্ণ বলে যাচ্ছেন, জ্যায়সি চেত কর্মণস্তে মতা বুদ্ধি জনার্দন তৎকিং কর্মণি ঘোরে মাং নিয়োজয়সি কেশব व्यामिश्रेणेव वाक्येन बुद्धिं मोहयसीव मे तदेकं वद निश्चित येन श्रेय अहम आपनयम्। তুমি কখনো বলছো জ্ঞান বড়, কখনো বলছো কর্ম বড়, আর তুমি তো আমাকে কনফিউজ করছো। তুমি আমাকে ঠিক করে বলো কোনটা। তখন উনি বললেন যে জ্ঞান ভালো, কিন্তু কর্ম যখন তোমার এই যে সেলফিশনেসের কথাটা আপনি বললেন না, যখন সেলফিশনেসের সার্কেলটা ছেড়ে আমরা আনসেলফিশনেস কোনো কাজ করি, নিজের ছেলে, নিজের মা, নিজের বউ, বর সব ঠিক আছে, কিন্তু তারপরে যদি অন্যদের জন্য করি তখন আমাদের সার্কেলটা বেড়ে যায়, বা তখন আস্তে আস্তে আনসেলফিশনেসটা আসে, যে অন্যেরটাও আমরা বুঝি। তো সেইভাবে, আর তখন উনি বললেন যে তুমি এইভাবে কর্ম করো, কর্মতে বেশি সুবিধে, কারণ জ্ঞানটা হচ্ছে ডিসপ্যাশনেট নলেজ। কারণ ওইটার মধ্যে যদি আমার মানে এই যেমন আমাদের চলছে এখন বাংলার পলিটিক্সে, যে যার স্বার্থের জন্য কিভাবে সব চোর ডাকাত সব একসঙ্গে মিলে সবাই করেছে, এটা করে যাই হোক, তো এই যে সেলফিশনেস, এটা ওরা এত গরিব মানুষদের কথা, লোকেদের কথা তো ভাবেনি যারা ওদেরকে ভোট দিয়ে এটা করেছে। তো তার মানে ওরা তো ওই যে আপনি দেখালেন না তখন নিচের লেভেলে নেমে যাচ্ছে, দিস ইজ হাউ উই গো ডাউন। যদি একটা জেনুইননেস থাকে, তখন ইউনিভার্সাল কনসিয়াসনেস আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডস whether there is genuineness or not. আমি এটাও আমার মজা লাগে যে যখন আমি রান্না করি, কৌটোটা একেবারে এয়ার টাইট, হ্যাঁ ধরুন নুন যাই হোক রান্না করছি, কিন্তু এই যে বর্ষাকাল নুনটা ভিজে গেছে, তো ইউনিভার্সাল কনসিয়াসনেস অল পারভেডিং, সব জায়গায় আছে। গরমকালে কাপড়গুলো শুকিয়েছে, বেশ গরম আছে। শীতকালে আমি কানাডায় থাকতাম, ওখানে শীতকালে বরফের মতো কাপড় ভাঁজ করা, ধোয়া কাপড় বরফের মতো কাপড়। তার মানে এই ঠান্ডা যে প্রকৃতি যে অল পারভেডিং, সে যতই এয়ারটাইট করে রাখে সেখানেও ঢুকবে। এইটাই হচ্ছে ইউনিভার্সাল কনসিয়াসনেসের পাওয়ার।
Universal, yeah, these are universal forces. Yes, you were referring to that. Absolutely. So we have covered integrality of planes and parts. We have covered the entire cosmic geography. We have covered the integrality of the method. Now we come to integrality of applicability, which means it applies, as jeta uni apni khankhar age bollen, it applies to every one of us in a different way. The principles are the same, but how it will bring us into its fold and how it will cater to us depends on our uniqueness, and it will operationalize itself in us in a unique way based on our own nature. And that is why this is not a formula driven path. Integral yoga is not a formulaic path. যে এই পরে সকালে উঠে চান করে 3 বার নিঃশ্বাস নাও, তারপর একটু চরণামৃত খেয়ে 10 মিনিট বসো, this is not this path. Those other paths are there. এই কবার মন্ত্র জপ করতে হবে, তারপর বাঁ হাত দিয়ে এতে, তারপর ডান হাত দিয়ে ওখানে বসো, তারপর 5 চামচ দুধ খাও. No, all this is not in this business. Integral yoga is a completely custom built process for every individual, administered by the divine directly. There is no intermediate guru, there is no teacher. This yoga, the teacher is the only teacher, divine himself. In this case, Aurobindo and the mother, because they are the direct incarnation, because the divine we can't even picture, right? So they have come in human form, so we can at least see them. And number 2, everything in the nature is accepted. You have certain strengths which I don't have. I have certain weaknesses which you don't have, etc., etc. So every part of the nature is accordingly accepted and given an upward turn, which means divinized. That's why I call it integrality of applicability. Every person in their unique way, every person's mix of nature and qualities, all uniquely divinized for doing a specific work of the divine for which he or she has been born on earth. But he or she can discover this when she has moved from the ego to the soul. Before that, he or she does not even know why I am here. That is why that soul discovery is the first, because that is the divine spark. Only then I am in tune with the divine, and the divine will and the intention of why I have been sent to earth will become clear to me. Till then I am just wasting my time in doing meaningless chores and tasks, jobs or whatever. Third, every life experience is a means for ascension of consciousness. Whether it's good, bad, ugly, beautiful, adverse or favorable, every life experience that comes, small and big, once we turn to the divine will use everything for accelerating our growth. That is why he calls it all life yoga is yoga. Third, aspect of intellectuality, it's totally incomplete. It takes you right till the end. No other path does this. Some path will leave you with some good bhakti feeling, or apni bolne ekটু bhalo lagche. Some path will give you with some knowledge, some illumination, will be nice peace. Some path will give, okay, I'm body, আমি আসলে এরকম আমি পুরোটা শরীরটাকে ঘুরিয়ে পা ধরতে পারছি বা whatever. They will give you perfections in these different ways. This yoga takes you all the way to complete divinization, and that is why there are 3 stages, he calls it. The first is the psychic transformation, which is the discovery of the soul. The second is the spiritual transformation, which is the realization of the self, both in his static and dynamic poise. Both in his static and dynamic poise, which means not just silent withdrawal from the world, but active dynamo of the divine consciousness for the work in the world. Because the world needs healing. It is in very, very bad shape. Third, the crown, which we cannot even speak about right now until we have proceeded. This is Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's unique contribution to humanity. This is the ultimate, final, decisive descent of the highest truth consciousness into the full working of material terrestrial existence. They have started this, but it is up to us if we respond to this call, because the full supramental transformation materialized in a life divine life on earth requires a greater number of people to respond to this call. Just 2 of them have done their bit, and they are still doing it. Because although they have had physical deaths in consciousness terms, they are still here, right here. But as more and more people respond to this step and this step, the world will move towards a supramental transformation and realize what his book calls life divine. এবার আমরা কি করতে পারি? What can we do? Just this evening discussion with a PowerPoint, or is there something more we can do? আপনাকে পরে আমি তাহলে যদি দরকার আপনি তার চান আমি পাঠিয়ে দেব। So what do we do? First and foremost, we just have to understand there are only 3 things that they ask. 3 things. We don't need a PhD for this. We don't need any other qualification. There are just 3 things required. They are psychological needs, not material requirements. Aspiration, rejection, surrender. Number 1, this call has to be strong that we want this. That is aspiration. And we have to want it unilaterally. We can't say we want it, but I also want some other comfort, some other new car, some new vacation. I also want some society post and want to earn some fame and money.
One-pointed focus.
One-pointed. It's not that you're not going to get that. You might still get it, but let the divine decide. It's not that divine is saying because you have to have a single-minded aspiration, you have to become poor or suffer or no. That's not what he's saying. Saying you be where you are, but hand yourself to me with the single aspiration of an integral transformation. I will decide what to give you, what to take from you, and what to give you. So in other words, in this yoga, you hand over charge of yourself. Because you realize you are actually capable of doing nothing. You may be capable of doing something in your job or in your family role or in your society. But as far as the spiritual life is concerned, you are capable of doing nothing. Except aspire, reject and surrender. Aspire, meaning is clear. Reject means anything that comes in the way. Let it go, throw it away. Which means the pull of the lower nature, temptation, etc., etc. Anything that interferes with the aspiration has to be rejected summarily. Third, the pinnacle, the glory, the one and only thing of our complete self-giving, but not to any other human being. This is not self-giving to আমি তোমাকে দিলাম তোমার সঙ্গে বেঁধেছি আমার প্রাণ যেটা এই তুমি হচ্ছে ওই তুমি,
Absolutely.
nobody else. That doesn't mean I have to destroy my current relationships. I maintain whatever, family, work, everything. But the turn is unequivocal. I don't have to go to the mountain. That's not what he's asking. Continue your all of life. But turn to the only thing that matters. As if it is the only thing that matters. Because it is the only thing that matters. Daily practice. How can we start doing this if we want to? Right from after this meeting or tomorrow, start reading their notes. It's all available free on the internet. You don't have to spend anything. Unless you want a hard copy. But if you are okay with reading PDF or whatever it is all on the internet. Start reading them. Not like you read a novel or a magazine or Shananda or Desh or Statesman or India Today. Not like that. You have to read this full concentration, full attention. 1 hour a day, doesn't whatever time you have. But when you are reading, offer yourself to that reading.
Absolutely.
But do it with a sadhana. That is why the practice is called a sadhana. And remember that when you are reading, it's not that you are reading print and book.
সাধনার অ্যাকচুয়ালি ইংলিশ ওয়ার্ড কিন্তু ঠিক নেই,
No,
মানে
না।
যে সাধনা বলতে যেটা আমরা বুঝি
sadhana English word,
ইংলিশে সেই ওয়ার্ড
not exactly. There is no exact word.
যে
You're right.
ধর্মটা
You can
মানে
tell
যে ধারণ
devotion.
করে সেটাই ধর্ম।
You can say
Some kind.
no, but
Dharma
sadhana there is no.
kind of
She's
religion.
absolutely right. There is no exact. I haven't found an exact.
Yeah.
That's why I use the word sadhana. And Westerners also, they have now got in my talks and all that. Abhijit knows. There are people who have now caught on to some of these terms, so they understand what sadhana means. Start reading. Offer yourself completely and realize it is not that you are reading a book or a printed word. Reading them means you are in consciousness contact with them. You are allowing yourself to be exposed to the infinite. That is the sense with which you have to read. You are opening yourself to be invaded by the eternal. I mean, it is that important. It is as significant as that. Reading their writings, you are opening yourself to the whole cosmos. If you read with that respect, that reverence, that surrender, that consciousness will penetrate us. It will invade, it will take charge, it will enter. We will be penetrated by it. Number 2, find time for silence every day. Half an hour, 1 hour, 15 minutes, whatever. Find time for silence. Complete silence. এই ওদিকে রেডিও চলছে, কিচেনে চা তৈরি হচ্ছে, আমাকে আবার যেতে হবে, nothing. Everything shut. Wherever, maybe at 4 a.m. in the morning, if you don't have any other time in the day, or at 11 in the night before sleeping. Whatever. And just do 2 practices. Number 1, go deep inside. Imagine your attention going deep inside, behind your heart center, looking for that divine spark or that soul. It is there. We may not be aware of it. But the very act of turning inwards is like an inward arrow. Think of an arrow piercing your heart center and going behind the heart center. That's where the Chaitya Purusha is. That's where the soul is. Not in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense. But you can actually do that and begin to get into contact with the soul. And after some time, you will actually feel this presence. After some time, I don't know how
Mind doesn't remain silent.
we can take it offline. The mind, there are ways to do that, but try. There are 2 ways I can tell you right away. When the thought comes, just throw it out. Like you on a peak angle, sounds like an obscene term, but like you spit something out, when the thought comes like an invasion. Imagine, it's actually not from within. It comes as an invasion. The moment it comes, throw it out. That's the recommended method of Aurobindo. If you cannot do that, and it is so strong that it is invading because of some anxiety or some event in your life which has happened, somebody has insulted you, or some heavy duty stuff has happened, and the thought is invading with great force, and if you can't reject and throw it out, then imagine your mind to be the sky and the thought like a bird which flies through. But don't identify with the bird, identify with the background sky. Listen carefully. Imagine a sky in which birds are flying. What happens? When the bird is flying, there is a movement, but the sky behind is unruffled. So when the thought comes, imagine the thought is the bird, but you are not the bird, but the sky. The bird goes, there's a little bit of ruffle, again it settles back to the calm blue sky. Use this analogy or this example to deal with your thoughts like moving birds who come and go, but the sky remains unmoved, untouched. And if you get in touch with the sky experience, gradually these disturbing birds will stop bothering you. Or even if the disturbing bird, you will let them come and go without you being pulled by them. Same to emotions also. Thoughts happen here, emotions happen here, in this part. Assume that this part, the universal vital, the divine vital, is unmoved. All these various invasions of fear, this, that, grief, coming and going. But the universal vital, like that sky, remains unmoved. So this is the silence. This is what you have to do in the silence practice. Once that silence is achieved, go inward to the heart center and upward to find the zone of silence above the head. Just these two things for 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day. If you can do it twice before sleeping, if you can do it before sleeping, the quality of sleep will change completely. If you can do this just before sleeping, your sleep quality will improve tremendously. Because you have attuned, in sleep what happens? You actually move into your inner planes of consciousness. And at some point you actually make contact with Satchidananda. Even for a second, for a few seconds. If you do the silence practice, your movement into the inner being becomes facilitated faster. You can reach Satchidananda faster. And that sense of silence and the ability to not get bothered by emotions means that the subconscious which comes up in your dreams with all sorts of troubling images and troubling memories and visuals will affect you less and disturb your sleep less, which means sleep will be better. You can actually reduce the quantity of number of hours but not suffer anything because the quality of sleep will improve. And early morning when you get up is when the subconscious memory, the stuff from below, the dirty stuff, all the repressed fears and anxieties, that's the time they come out in the small hours of the morning. So that's why sometimes you wake up, you're very disturbed, often. If you do that 20 minutes at that time now, you have straight away, as if morning, done a cleaning of a towel, taken out the shit and throw it out. Try it. Two more things. Apply the principle of oneness for universal empathy and soul level connection. Connect with others at the level of the soul. Try and imagine to see the divine in everything. It's not easy because we only see our outer nature and human beings with all their faults and imperfections. But know, the back of your head, that the divine inhabits everything. But just holding that imaginary thought, because it's imaginary, right now we are not feeling it. The divine is everywhere. We see filth and nonsense everywhere, right? So it's difficult to imagine that the divine is behind all this nonsense. So much of filth in society. But assume it is true, then the divine will confirm it through experience.
But the angers come due to expectation.
It's a different subject. handling emotions and vital is a separate subject on its own. We won't be able to go there today. That's a very, very detailed level.
And this silence, how to practice it? As you say, thoughts keep on coming.
Would you explain two things? Imagine you're just whenever that happens, try and go home. Either try to see the thought coming and just throw it out. It's like I can give you an example. It's like you're in the window, your window is open and a bird is trying to enter. Just shut the window. It's as simple. That hold this visually. And imagine that bird, park, chil, or whatever that invading bird is trying to enter your window into your room. Shut the window.
I find it so difficult.
I know. So it's not obviously easy, but it's not as easy. But try this. Or, if that doesn't work, imagine that bird is coming and flying, but you are the sky.
Like sky.
Or think that it's a ripple on the water, but you are the ocean. The things are coming, some fish are flying or some stones are dropping and the surface is rippling. But you are in the depth. And the surface ripples are just surface, they come and go. But the depth remains untouched.
See, I can't remain without any thought. Yes, silence means without any thought, right?
Yes. By silence I mean without any thought. Not without any speech. Without any speech is obvious. Because if I'm speaking then I am...
Suppose I'm sitting,
Yes.
I just keep my eyes closed and my mind should be without any thought.
Should be money, it's not that it has to be immediately, but you have to gradually work towards it.
That is what is required.
It will not happen immediately. Obviously, it happens
It
for none
doesn't
of us.
happen, I've tried so many times. Keeps on
Start
coming.
reading your... See, it depends on what spiritual influence you have exposed yourself in your life. If we have not exposed ourselves to spiritual influence doing this on our own, it's very difficult. Of course it is very difficult. That's why we are what we are. Because we have not bothered to allow a higher power to come and help us. Because we thought we are good enough. Amra is strong. We are enough.
I can't do it.
So good, that's a good admission. Allow the higher force to come and do it. It will do it. Just sincerely call for it. So if you can just do these two things, it's easier said than that. Just by reading a slide is not, but you have to sit on this and you have to sit on this, you have to think about it, you have to orient your life accordingly. It's not a one evening event, it's a lifelong thing.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that if you start within a few weeks, you will see a difference. The point is that the integral yoga is a lifelong journey, but if we sincerely turn with these three things and start these three practices, especially the last one.
That is what I am saying. I just told right away. That is the last point.
See now, as you say.
But you have to apply it in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, not just discuss, but in your life actually, when you have somebody challenges, karna padega.
Going through this.
Without going through, but just by intellectual principle, kuch nahi hoga.
As you said, it's a state
Sadhana.
of silence. State of silence. Now, how does it help? Well, in medical term, how does it?
Silence allows you, in medical term, all I can say is that with silence your dopamine, serotonin and some of those things will, basically you will have your hormonal balance will shift towards enzyme hormonal. That's the matter. But that's not the crux of this discussion. That happens, that's not wrong. All this mindfulness based stress reduction, remember that thing I mentioned in that second bullet? It's all based, they don't have any spiritual influence. They are just saying, if I can silence my mind, my whole body fluidic balance of the various chemicals gets into a better homeostasis, a better equilibrium in medical term. I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
So it will have a better regulation in that sense. So the good hormones and the good. So there's a third one. Serotonin, dopamine, and then the third one. These will get secreted more and more, and they will take charge of your system.
That will That will calm my disturbance.
Yes, but we have to go much beyond that. That's the first step only.
That,
When the spiritual
that
inspiration,
is the mental fitness. And where from the physical fitness comes.
well, if the chemical balance in your body improves, it will have an effect on your physical system. If there
You
are
don't need to do the this the free hand exercises around.
do it, but that is not going to move you in
That
this
will not
path.
improve the the as you said the mental
No.
state.
No, no, it will. If you do physical exercises, the mind feels good. Of course, it feels good. If for example, if I have to do a heavy study after say reading Aurobindo say for 2 hours, you can't take more because you're already the download is so heavy. I go to the gym and do a 45-minute workout, including weights and treadmill and some whatever lateral trainer. When I'm doing that, the body there is an energetic, there's a pranic movement in the body and the mind clears out. I can come back and do another 2 hours. So it does happen. But all of this is not spiritual ascension. This is all dealing at the level of mind and body.
The silence will improve.
Silence will open up to the spiritual. Silence means, in figurative terms, the more I'm silent, the more I'll be able to hear the voice of God. Just understand that now. Not in a literal sense, but what I'm saying is, the more I am silent, the more I will open myself to the spiritual descent of information, peace and force and light. There. This is not an imaginary thing I'm saying. Actually happens. There is a descent. But my attunement to that requires a certain level of spiritual maturity. When my mind is drowned with the clamor of emotional upset and ego-based expectation and the engagement in normal life, what he calls the ordinary pastures, then I can't hear that voice. It's like if there's a loud music playing in the room and somebody is speaking softly, can you hear? You can't hear. God speaks softly. God doesn't shout. The divine doesn't shout. The divine is silent. So to tune into the divine, we have to become silent. So, but once the spiritual peace descends and I get access to spiritual power, my requirement of the material, including I need this food, this medicine, this reduce. If I can open up myself to this healing, then your prescriptions are no longer necessary for it. Or not necessary as much. I don't have to take which in a normal state, because I don't have access to that power, all I am doing is I am having only medicines. That's not a good way to live, right? It may be a short-term necessity if I have an infection or an illness. But I can't live on a diet of medicine, which is what most of us do. Calcutta is, I think, the topmost city in terms of Mishtit Dokan and Oshudit Dokan. Highest density of Mishtit Dokan and Oshudit Dokan. Rolet Dokan also.
Both are interrelated.
Alright, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.